Name the ordered pair of each of these points in the coordinate plane, and then identify which quadrant each point falls into. The first thing we need to do is find the x and y coordinates for each of these points. In other words, we need to find the ordered pair for each of these points. Remember, the ordered pair is the x, y coordinate pair that helps us identify where the point is in the coordinate plane. A trick to help you remember which order x and y go into is remember alphabetical order. X comes before y in the alphabet. Just like in an ordered pair, x comes before y. Now to do this, we're going to count along the horizontal line, called the x-axis, and the vertical line, called the y-axis. Let's start by finding the ordered pair that identifies A. So first we need to count along the x-axis until we find A. To do this, we start where the two axes meet, called the origin. Then we count along the x-axis until we hit A. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. When we hit 4, that's where A is. So that means the x coordinate for A is 4. We found the first half of our ordered pair for A. Now to find the second half, the y coordinate, we need to do the same thing but count along the y-axis. So again, we start at the origin where the two axes meet and we count up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When we hit 5, we see that we've hit A. So that means the y coordinate for A is 5. Now we've identified the ordered pair for A, 4, 5. When x is 4 and when y is 5, we combine them together and we find A. Now let's do the same thing for B. B is over here, so we want to count the x-axis first. But we have to go backwards on the x-axis to find B. So we need to go into the negative values of x. So we start at 0 and we count -1, -2, -3, and we hit B. So B is at the x coordinate -3. Now let's find that y coordinate. We start at the origin and we count up 1. Hey, there's B. So our y coordinate for B is 1. So B is at the ordered pair -3, 1. Our x value is -3 and our y value is 1. Put them together and we find B. Now let's do C. Well, again, we have to count into the negatives on the x-axis. So we start at 0 and we count -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. And we find C. So we have the x coordinate -5. Now for the y value. Well, we have to go into the negatives on the y-axis. So we count down on the y-axis to find C. Start at 0 and we count -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. At -5 we find C. So C is at the ordered pair -5, -5. When x is -5 and when y is -5, we find C. Last, let's identify D. We count on the x-axis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's D, when x is 6. Now for y. Again, we have to count down or into the negatives on the y-axis. So we start at 0 and count -1, -2, and we find D. So D is at the ordered pair 6, -2. When x is 6 and when y is -2, those 2 points come together and we find D. So now we've labeled each one of our ordered pairs. In our next step, we need to take each one of our points with their ordered pairs and identify which quadrant each point falls into. So in step number 2, we need to identify quadrants. To create the quadrants on the coordinate plane, we need to use the x and y axis to split the coordinate plane up into 4 quadrants. Now we just need to figure out which quadrant is which. Now, quadrant 1 is where the x and the y values are both positive. So let's see where that happens. Let's see. The x values are always positive over here, and the y values are always positive up here. Well, the quadrant where that is always true, the x values are positive here, the y values are always positive here, this must be quadrant 1. So the upper right quadrant is quadrant 1. It's the point where the x and the y values are always positive. And we can check that with the point that's in that quadrant. Point A, the point 4, 5. Both 4 and 5 are positive, so x and y are both positive. That means our point A lies in quadrant 1. Now to find each of the next quadrants, we want to work backwards in a counterclockwise motion. Now, quadrant 2 is where the x value is negative, but the y value is positive. So let's see. The x value is going to be negative here, and the y value is always positive up here. So that leaves x is negative, y is positive. This must be quadrant 2. So now we've identified quadrant 2. This quadrant up here, the upper left quadrant. That's where x is negative and y is positive. So point B is in quadrant 2. Our x is negative and our y is positive in that ordered pair. Now moving in a counterclockwise motion, it would make sense that this must be quadrant 3. But let's double check. Quadrant 3 is where x and y are both negative. Well, let's see. X is always negative, y is always negative. This is quadrant 3. And we can verify that with our ordered pair that's in the quadrant, -5, -5. Both x and y are negative, so that means that point C is in quadrant 3. Well, that only leaves one more quadrant, quadrant 4. And this one is the only quadrant that's not labeled. So it must be quadrant 4. But let's double check. Quadrant 4 is where x is positive and y is always negative. So let's see. X is always positive, y is always negative. Yep, this is quadrant 4. And we can double check with the point, D, that's in quadrant 4. We have the point 6, -2. Our x value is positive and our y value is negative. So we're in quadrant 4. Now we've taken each one of our individual points, labeled the ordered pairs, and then identified which quadrant each point falls into.